This video is sponsored by Surfshark. The Rings of Power and She-Hulk concluded their first seasons within 24 hours of each other. Regardless of the victory laps the creative teams behind them may do in the media, the powers that be at both Disney and Amazon know that their big bets weren't the commercial hits they needed them to be. For Disney, the situation is especially dire, as She-Hulk is but the latest disappointing installment of a larger Marvel franchise in rapid decline. In short, both The Lord of the Rings and Marvel are going the way of Star Wars. A brand which is theatrically dead, and if the recent Nielsen numbers for Andor are anything to go by, it's slowly dying on Disney Plus as well. To prevent this from happening, there are reports that independently of each other and behind closed doors, both Amazon's Rings of Power and Disney's Marvel Cinematic Universe are in the process of being retooled. But is the retooling that would be required to make them commercially successful again even possible, so long as the executives who messed up in the first place are still there? We shall see, for in this video, we will begin with going through the rumored Rings of Power retooling. Then we'll go through the rumors from behind the scenes at Marvel, and finally, explore if any of this might actually help. Considering that The Lord of the Rings was a worldwide cultural phenomenon for 3 years in a row 2 decades ago, and that Marvel was the dominant entertainment brand on the planet up until a couple of years ago, one wouldn't think that either of them could ever be in such a precarious position, but here we are. It turns out quite a few viewers will cancel their Amazon Prime Video and Disney Plus subscriptions and instead take to the high seas when you let quality slide, and then call your fans nasty things like misogynistic trolls and patently evil to boot. But to be clear, neither Midnight's Edge nor our sponsors condone piracy, even if the creatives at the likes of Disney and Amazon think you're evil and stupid. Not only is piracy wrong, you would be exposing yourself to endless spyware, tracking software and other malware out there on the high seas. And that's on top of all the data that is stolen from you during all of your regular browsing and sold to third parties. Have you noticed all the spam and scam emails you're getting? Well, they got your email address from those third parties, that's how that happens. There is a fix for all of that though. To protect yourself, you need to protect your data, and a good way of doing that is through a VPN, such as the one delivered by this channel's sponsor, Surfshark. A VPN, or Virtual Private Network, is a privacy protection tool which guarantees instant online safety and encrypts all data sent via the internet, thereby protecting your data and you. But there's more. Surfshark allows you to bypass geo-blocking restrictions by changing the country you access the internet from, which gives some great advantages when it comes to streaming. For instance, you can access 15 different Netflix libraries, all with a different selection of movies and TV series simply by changing your virtual location. Not only that, outside of the US, Star, the international version of Hulu, comes bundled with Disney+. If you're in the US and change your location to, say, the UK, well then you just might get that too. That's pretty good, but it gets even better. If you type in the code MIDNIGHT when ordering, that triggers an exclusive offer in which you now get 83% off the normal list price, plus 3 extra months for free. Furthermore, Surfshark also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in trying it out. Do check out the link in the description below for further details and to order. Thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video, and with that, let's begin by seeing what's going on behind the scenes at the studios. Before we move on, we have to reiterate that what we are about to present are reports coming from industry insiders and not from the established industry trades. As such, much of the information we are about to reveal cannot at this point be independently verified, which means you should treat it as a rumor and take it with a pinch of salt. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's begin behind the scenes of Amazon. While there have been many articles seemingly celebrating the success of the Rings of Power, it is something of an open secret that relative to its gigantic budget, Amazon's billion-dollar gamble was a misfire, and such an obvious misfire that none but the most deluded can pretend it was all it could be. As we covered in our most recent Lord of the Rings video, even The Guardian, a publication which up till this point had been overwhelmingly positive towards it, recently came out with an article aptly titled, "Now it's over, let's come out and say it. The Rings of Power was a stinker." But even prior to that, multiple trade articles we have covered in the past few weeks stated that so much money had been put into the Rings of Power that it was in effect too big to fail, and many a career would be cut short among the executives in Amazon's Prime Video production division if it did. As such, you can expect the executive team at Prime Video to take action out of pure self-preservation, and according to unconfirmed reports, that is exactly what they're doing. We first heard about this from our good friend and industry veteran Chris Gore during the Monday, October 17th edition of our Midnight's Edge in the Morning stream. The relevant section has been clipped and put up in Midnight's Edge Live archives for those who want to check it out. Click here for the shortcut to that. What Mr. Gore revealed was that what he had heard from his industry connections was that the feeling in Amazon was that the Rings of Power had not only failed, but failed worse than they anticipated that it would. Even so, simply cancelling the show is not an option, as Amazon are contractually bound to make a total of 50 episodes, regardless of whether or not there is viewership to justify them. The show simply must go on, even if they end up losing money in the process. Not only that, being Bad Robot alumni, the showrunners will likely have insisted that their contracts contain a clause precluding them from being outright fired. So what to do? Well, according to Mr. Gore's sources, the likely course of action is that Payne and McKay will formally remain as showrunners and continue to be the public faces of the series. But behind closed doors, Amazon will bring in someone else and more experienced in an attempt to right the ship and salvage the mess. This is in line with what we have since heard from another source unconnected to Mr. Gore. Though business will continue as usual to the public, behind the scenes, Payne and McKay are reportedly in the process of being sidelined, while someone else are trying to salvage this from season 2 onwards. How this will be framed to the public, if at all, remains to be seen. One possibility is that if formally announced, which is doubtful, but if so, the new de facto showrunner will be brought on as just another addition to the writing team. But again, this remains to be seen. For Amazon as a whole, of course, it doesn't matter one way or another what happens with the Rings of Power. It is the careers of the executives at Prime Video that can't afford to continue in the same direction set forth in Season 1. But someone else who can't afford to continue down the current path is the Disney Corporation as a whole. Star Wars and Marvel were both among the hottest entertainment commodities on the planet, but over the last few years of Disney management, both have arguably floundered, with Marvel sinking and Star Wars already under the proverbial water. Case in point, even with 3 episodes released at the same time, Andor still couldn't crack Nielsen's top 10 streaming shows in the week of its release. The damage to the Star Wars brand could very well be irreparable, and so the immediate priority for Disney is preventing Marvel from sinking to the bottom alongside it. Our friends Valiant Renegade and known leaker WDW Pro have recently covered the merchandise side of this, breaking stories of inside reports which indicate toys for anything Phase 4 are collecting dust in toy shelves everywhere, to the point where third parties have raised flags to Marvel. This matters, because if the toys don't sell, that is indicative of the entire ecosystem built around Marvel's IPs falling apart, which suggests that the brand itself is already in a serious state of decline. The Disney Corporation can write off Star Wars if need be, but not Star Wars and Marvel. To this end, Doomcock and WDW Pro are reporting that focus groups are being held with the participation of third-party licensees and at the behest of Bob Chapek, who reportedly no longer trusts Kevin Feige's recommendations alone, not after the ongoing brand damage Phase 4 has proven to be. That such focus groups are being held suggests a retooling is coming to Marvel, and that it will be commercially driven rather than ideologically. But there is a challenge with such retoolings though, which both Marvel and The Lord of the Rings will have to face. The challenge with any retooling is that course correction is easy enough, but how do they know if the new course will actually right the ship and not steer it even further off course? Because that can happen. Case in point, Star Trek Discovery. As we reported at the time, the first season underperformed. Cancelling it was not an option, as international distributor Netflix were legally bound to fund and distribute more seasons, but they did demand a retooling for season 2. But then the second season underperformed as well, and so it was retooled again for the third season, and so it continued to the point where every new season was a retooling from the previous one, ever hoping to find something that clicked. But it never worked, and international distributor Netflix dropped out the moment they had fulfilled their contractual obligations. So, what went wrong? Well, one possibility is that for all the changes in showrunners and attempts at retooling, the key movers, players and decision makers at the top mostly stayed the same, and so Discovery mostly stayed the same as well, as it was still fundamentally done their way, and their way was the problem from the onset. The kind of radical rethinking that was needed to solve the problem simply could not be done in that environment, as the power players in charge could not admit that the core problems and values that they were invested in and had inserted into the show were the problem. This could turn out to be a challenge for both Amazon and for Marvel as well. Sure, Amazon can bring in a new de facto showrunner or two, and Disney can conduct focus group research. But the same incumbents who caused both brands, independently of each other, to veer off course in the first place are the ones who will have to execute the course correction. Will they welcome whichever changes are suggested, or try to block them and keep what they were invested in? By contrast, for all the problems they may have over at DC, this isn't one. When David Zaslav came in and decided to retool DC, he simply fired all executives from the previous administration, ranging from DC chief Walter Hamada to company president Ann Sarnoff. As such, anyone who could have undermined Zaslav's retooling are gone. That doesn't mean the audience automatically will respond to the new DC, which in a sense started already with Black Adam, but there at the very least won't be any significant internal resistance to it. Inside of both Marvel and the Rings of Power, there may be. Do you think Disney and Amazon can course correct Marvel and the Rings of Power respectively without doing a major retooling of the executive team as well? Let us know in the comments, and before you go, remember that to help protect your data and bypass quarrelsome geo-blocking restrictions, you should get Surfshark VPN. Use our code MIDNIGHT to get 83% off plus 3 extra months for free. Link is in the description.